Hello, and welcome to another week of the Story Darks podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we are continuing our November discussion of November with Volume 3, The Voice on the End of the Phone. Is that the name of the volume?
It is.
Okay.
It's also
the name of the little snippet at the beginning.
The first chapter, yeah.
The first chapter, yeah.
Volume 3, this book came out in October 2020. So about 5 months after.
A very, very tense month, I will say.
Yeah. Well, book 2 came out in July 2020, right in the heart of things. Not that things are a whole lot better in October, but then next week we can get to volume 4. That came out in February 2021. So the last 3 books there followed the 5-month release schedule that I believe was initially scheduled for when it was three volumes, before the world went on fire in 2020. Maybe it was 6 months. There were supposed to be like 5-6 month gaps between them all. And then obviously there was a much longer gap between 1 and 2 because of everything that was going down in the industry then. But once things got back up and running again, they had this kind of regular 5-month gap, which is fairly common, or I guess has become common because this was an early adopter of this graphic novel release model. These standalone and or connected novels like the Reckless books from Brubaker and Phillips, or the Night Eaters books from Lewin and Takeda, all follow a very similar schedule. Like I want to say the Reckless books came out every 5 months, maybe 5 or 6 months. They put 5 of those out there, like clockwork. They throw one out there every 5-6 months. You'd see another one out. Maybe it's a little longer than that. But the idea of your audience is going to wait for this because you're getting the whole story right here. So right. As long as you tell them, this thing is going to be out in 5-6 months and it actually does come out then, it's not a big deal. People can wait for that. The problem is when you put the book out and the next one is like nebulous next year sometime. And then you're like, well, what the hell, Right. So having a date and again,
I was just thinking back to the events of October 2020, which was the mail-in presidential election.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on.
That the little West Wing tribute thing on HBO helped me get through my anxiety of. Yeah. Anyway, I think I found this volume to be. I thought this one's going to be difficult to discuss because it's a lot like the first one in that. Yeah. There was some rising action, and then it kind of resets back into setup mode for the finale.
Well, and what I think is really interesting about this volume, and kind of the lead thing I have in my notes here is, I think this is the volume where if I had to guess, where we got the most material that probably would not have existed if this were only a 3-volume series.
Yeah,
and not saying that's a good or bad thing, but the whole idea and the premise of the book is it's what the tagline? It was one city, one night, 3 women, right? That's the whole thing there. Well, the one city, one night part, in terms of the action that happens in volume 3 here, spans a couple of minutes. You think about what the actual action that happens on this night is Kowalski on the phone with her partner or wife. I'm not quite sure what she is there, but talking to her as she's sitting in her car outside the warehouse, right? And then she goes in, gets into a firefight with some cops, and then she breaks down the door where Dee and Emma Rose are tied up. And what then happens in that room between the two of them is Emma Rose basically crawls across the floor, knocks the chair over from Dee, and they get out of their ropes. That's all that happens in the one night.
Yeah.
Everything else is backstory, and it fills in, and we get just about everything. We pretty much learn everything there is that's needed to know about both Kowalski and Dee. We fill in kind of all the gaps of what their backstories were, how they got to where basically the position they were in when the book started. We fill all that stuff in. Emma Rose still bit of a mystery. We still see she's had the least amount of page time by far for the other two women. But we get all this backstory that fills out the character. But in terms of what's actually happening on this night, the events of the night in present time, very little actually happens. And I think that's a luxury that was afforded to them. And I'm guessing this happened again. We talked about it last week. The expansion from 3 books to 4 books happened after the publication of 1, but before the publication of 2. So after the first solicitation came out, I'm guessing while they worked the story, they started seeing they needed a little more space. And I feel like this is one area where they thought we have this story to really kind of build out and fill out these world from a character standpoint. And I think you see a lot of that in here. And I think the story is a lot richer for it. You get a lot of great character work, a lot of understanding, but in terms of actual plot and action, like nothing really happens again, right? It just ends on the big moment of our 3 protagonists finally all in the room together. And then, that leads you off into what the end story is going to be. So it's a lot of cool build up. And I think you said setup.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'd call it setup, but I know what you're saying there. It's a lot of it's filling in the gaps for the characters. That if you didn't have those things filled in, I think there's still a version of the story where you can still follow it, right? Like you
could cut the whole. I forget the name of it. Lesbo drug addict background thing, and you could cut
you could cut out the specifics. You could just, like they did in volume 1, right? You just show the flashes and you have an understanding. Okay, this is what her life is like. This is what Dee's life is like. Okay, or what her past was like. And then you see, this is what Kowalski, her life was like as a cop, how she was involved and then she wasn't. And then she got, so you could see these flashes and still have a sense of who the characters are and where they were when they started the story. I don't think you needed all the detail.
Well, my thing was you don't even technically need the flashes. Like my thing is
that's true.
You could surmise someone's backstory from the way they speak now. It requires a little more guesswork, a little more like leaning into things. It's if it were a film, you would say you're giving the actor a lot of heavy lifting. Here, you would be giving it to the artist. Or I guess to the writer in dialogue to say like, you got to write dialogue that isn't a lot of narration. Like, ever since my father brought me in from flying a kite one day, it's like, well, that's bad writing. We all know that. It's slightly better writing to, no, not slightly. It's much, much better writing to show the flashback and then the brilliant artistry of like the string there and the string of the hands tied, kind of weaving these together intuitively. And I wonder if there's a way that you pick up that character's determined, gritty, doesn't take crap from men attitude without the backstory at all. Can you just pick that up by telling the story in the present, which I suspect is what they would have had to do with the original 3-volume format.
And I imagine they probably don't abandon those, but there is a world though where the story works, where the whole idea, these are just 3 random women, right? And you understand who they are based on their present circumstances alone. I think this story can still work with that, right? Just based on how they present in the world and how we see them being treated. Like, we don't need to necessarily know the exact backstory of Kowalski to understand where she fits in the hierarchy of the police department. We get that just by watching her at the desk and seeing how other cops talk to her.
I was just going to say the way other cops talk to her. Yeah, 100%.
But I'm saying you get all that in real time. Now, obviously, they felt it's important to go back and understand that she has specific connections to the people involved with what's happening in the city. And that's fine. And that's great. But you understand what her place is and what her status is. You don't need to know much about Dee other than like she's walking around with this cane, and she has all this money, and her life sucks, And
well, yeah,
the understanding of what came before
has and doesn't have money. Right.
Well, I'm saying, we see her after she's had this gig for a while. She's just blowing it on drugs and booze and strip clubs and things like that. Right.
The only stuff you can do with crap loads of unexplained cash.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
You can't open a 401k with it because the IRS can be like, I'm sorry, where did you get $100,000 cash from?
Yeah, but do we need to know that she is a recovering addict and this is, and how she ended up hurting her leg? It's not necessary. It fills more out, but you understand that whatever hand life dealt her wasn't great, and she's in a bad spot, which is why she was targeted initially to have the job of going into the radio booth.
Right.
So none of this stuff I think is necessary. But I think when they clearly they had the story for these characters and they wanted to fill it out. They wanted to show more. So I'm not again. I don't think it takes anything away from the story, but that's why I said I could see a lot of the specificity that comes in this volume would have been the stuff that would have been lost had it only been 3 volumes.
Yes. Yeah. I totally agree with that.
You don't lose the story. You don't lose the plot. You lose the fullness of the world. And I guess specifically of the characters, and if it was important to them to show that, then great.
If it's not that, then it's about the plot. And there's not been a lot of plot yet.
Exactly.
After completing 3/4 of the story.
Exactly.
And it's like, my God, if you didn't have the characters, you'd have close to nothing right now.
The ball hasn't moved that far down the field. You know that there's these explosions and fires going on. You know that dirty cops are involved, and it involves something about the illegal transport and use of evidence, right? And that's about it. That's about it. You don't know for what means. Other than, is it a get rich quick thing? Are they supply you? You don't know anything about it. Very little has come out, and you still don't even know what the radio transmission was for. It's a signal for something, right? She had
and there's a line about how the cops have been blowing stuff up all over the city.
Yeah,
and it's well, I mean, like rooftops to cover their tracks, or had they been blowing other things up, and that's part of what's being communicated. You don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. So the actual events of this night are, in a way, they're secondary. It's almost like at this point, the book is telling you what's happening is less important that it's happening at all. That the important thing is just chaos is raining down. And this is how the lives of 3 unconnected, disparate, random women happen to coincide and coalesce on, through it all, through the mayhem of just living in chaotic times, and not saying that the plot isn't, the actual meaning behind it isn't important, but after 3 volumes, because you have nothing else to go on, it's almost like they're telling you it's secondary, that the specifics don't actually really matter. We're telling you what it is, but as the why, the how, is it some big grand what's important is that the city's on fire. What's important is that
this
chaos
isn't
is raining.
Story that
it's more, I think, how these women respond to the chaos versus then the chaos being the important thing.
Yeah, and in light of that, I frankly am not in a good or bad way, but I'm a little speechless. I don't know what to say about this other than, I could start going through things I like and things I don't like, which is basically all my notes are. Mm-hmm. And the first story, the one that the title comes from is The Voice on the Other End of the Phone, which Kowalski with her partner, and want to clarify, romantic partner, presumably. Yeah, I said certainly not cop partner, but when you say cop and partner,
that is true. Yeah, that's why I said I don't know. I don't know if they specified anywhere if she is her wife or not. Because I don't think they're ever referred to each other in that way. So that's why I said wife, partner. I'm not certain what it is there, but
either way, it's the worried girlfriend at home. Cop trope.
Can I tell you what I love about that?
What do you love about it?
I love the use of color there. I know we talked about it.
Yes. Well, I love the panels.
Well, yes, I love the way the panels are done, the way that her partner is in shadow the whole time, but just the way we talked about it, especially in the first arc, right? When each character got their own chapter in the book, right? And each character kind of got a filter to show their story. And Kowalski's is her present timeline story is in that yellowish kind of fade on it. And I like that they keep that through here. So
and her
all
partner
of her
is in the dark.
In this dark blue,
No,
very,
like she's literally in the dark.
She's in the shadow, and it's this very cold blue, and it's up against this very, I was going to say warm. It's not quite warm because the yellow is kind of harsh there, but it's a super, super high contrast. And the way it cuts back through, it's not every other panel. Sometimes it's too, it mixes up, but visually, like to my eyes, it looks so good. And it's almost like it's one of those things where you can go back and forth. You don't have to know what they're saying if you know what the scene is, right? Like I said, it's the worried partner, the worried spouse back home for the cop. And the way each character is shown, what that conversation is. It's the cop being like, no, it's fine, I'm good. And the spouse being like, just come home. Like, it's not your job. It's that same dialogue you see in every cop movie or cop show. And you get that feeling, at least I get that feeling just visually, just from the paneling, and the way it's colored. What is it? It's we're going 12, right? It's 333. Yeah. So it's these thin, vertical panels, all down the page, and that there is. You can just visually, without even reading the dialogue, you understand what you're supposed to feel based on the facial expressions of Kowalski and the shadow, like the lack of facial expression on her spouse.
Yeah. It's a beautiful few pages. That being said, I'm still kind of in the camp personally of not that interested in Kowalski. Like they have not done enough to make me feel compelled to care about this character, even though I know, like on some level reading it, like if there's any way out of this for the three of them, it's going to be Kowalski, I think, making the biggest sacrifice. Like to have the inside knowledge, to already be excluded, and to shove your way back in. Like that's all good setup. But again, so far for me, she's been all set up, no payoff for 75% of the story.
I think that's dead on observation. The idea that we were talking about, the idea that it's these three random women, right, coming together on this explosive night in the city. Well, Kowalski is not that random.
Right.
She has ties to whatever is going on, however far in the past it is. She knows who the players are. She may not know exactly why this is happening now, but she has some knowledge that Dee and Emma Rose don't. They are the ones who just got caught up in this. Now, of course, we know that Dee was working for this in some capacity, but still, Kowalski has the inside knowledge. And I think you're right about that. This idea that means she both has more to give to the story and more to lose from it. Because there's, I'm sure, I think we get a little bit of it in some of the narration in here from her. There's a level of regret or remorse. Maybe that's too much. There's a sense of responsibility, right, that she has, that she was part of this, that weighs on her in some level. And it's manifesting now to the point where she admits she's not a cop. She still wears the uniform because she used to be a cop, but working at the 911 dispatch desk, she's a civilian contractor, but she's at a point where she can go full shootout with these cops and kind of feel bad, but not really, Like she can just go and shoot these guys because she has a sense of what they're doing and who they are because she knows them.
Yeah. I can't think of anything sadder, frankly, than no longer being a cop and cosplaying as a cop.
Yeah. And cosplaying while being around cops, while being still around and having to work
You're doing
with
cop adjacent work.
Yeah.
Could, in the course of normal work, you could run into real cops who see you, and if they're people who don't know you, it's stolen valor, right? I mean, I would think New York City, you're probably getting, some pizza or hot dog kickbacks from the vendors, taking care of the block.
but I think that also, though, it is meant to show something about her personality, good or bad, because I think the narration starts off, right, is her history of like, she says something about, I always knew I was a cop. I just had to prove it to everybody else.
Right.
So we have an understanding of who she is. And I think I quoted The Wire last week. I think it was, Bunk's line about being natural police. Someone that just has this in them.
It's crazy how much I think about The Wire when I read this book.
It's a lot. Yeah.
And there's nothing like, that's not a criticism of Matt Fraction. It's not trying to be The Wire.
In no way whatsoever. But there's a lot of it. The idea of there's something about doing the police work that Kowalski's doing that registers to me. That there's a Bunk McNulty level approach to this, like Sisyphean approach to this, of this like why are you doing this, but we understand now, though, looking back in volume 2, when after she's like told to go home after pulling like 5 straight shifts at the desk, go home. She doesn't go home. She goes to the house fire, the apartment fire, right. Where Dee was and where Emma Rose found the gun, to the point where she flashes a badge and gets in to walk around. And now that you know that she's just cop adjacent, now that's like, what are you doing? Like you are now actively committing a crime. It's one thing just to,
yeah.
But there is her justification, the book's justification is that, hey man, this is in my blood. This is who I am. I can't not be a cop, uniform or badge be damned. This is what I do. And I don't know if the book is saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't think they're trying to judge her too harshly either way. I think they're simply establishing this is who this person is, that no matter what she's doing, maybe even to her own detriment, she's going to pursue this because she can't let it go. She's incapable of dropping that part of her character or her psyche, her personality, whatever. This is just in her. And yeah, maybe that gets her in trouble. And clearly it does, and clearly it has. And presumably it's getting her in trouble right now in the book. She's just gone and killed a bunch of cops. Regardless if it's the dirty, she went and just shot a bunch of cops, actual cops.
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, well, so there you go. I was like, I don't know what we're going to talk about. We start with what I consider to be the least interesting one. Yeah. And we had a good 15 minutes easily.
Yeah.
So that's, I'm not mad. I'm just saying, like, I didn't know what there would be to say. So the next story after that one is, and I also like how Kowalski, I mean, like they transition from one story to the next story with the 12 panels.
Yeah.
The very next one is loss management. Mm-hmm. And that's the one where it's like, you want to talk about a single chapter where very little happens.
Yeah. Well, that's all flashback, right? That's going back and being like, here's how Mr. Mann ended up in the back of the car with a bullet in his head. Right?
Yes.
Is that the next one? Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not flashing that far back, but then...
Yeah. It's flashing maybe an hour or so back.
Except the last page has that hazed over look, which makes it seem like that is a hash, like slightly further back, even though... Yeah, because that's all them sitting around the precinct.
Oh, yeah.
And then it pops back into the present for pock.
Yeah, you do fly. Yeah, because they're... Like Mr. Mann, again, his story, as we saw in the first volume... has like the blue sheen over it, right? But the flashback is like straight kind of a gray, muted gray. And so we see that him and everyone's a lot younger there. And it's meant to be fairly obvious that hopefully it's obvious that, they're all in their uniforms and all that. But yeah, that's just tying up the loose end of like, how did he get in the trunk with a bullet in his head?
Right. Which I didn't need, but
yeah, again, is that super necessary? I think that's something you could have shown. Again, if we're cutting back on the story, you could have shown that in flashes, right? Of Ward cop 12-6 there, of like the flashes of Mr. Man running away, of him being chased, him being shoved into the trunk, him with the gun. Like you could have done that in like 2 pages of panels, maybe, you know?
Right.
But kind of seeing and getting a little more of their history and all that, and I think maybe also just getting, I don't know, this one felt the most extraneous in terms of like, because he's dead, you know, like he's already dead. Again, like you said, it's a flashback, but it's a flashback to not that long ago. It's a flashback to right before they go and pick up Emma Rose.
It almost feels like it wasn't written as a flashback, and perhaps it was cut from 1 or 2. You know, if it were like, it doesn't make sense, but if it had been written in 1 and they thought they were only doing 3, they cut it. And then when they realized they were doing 4, it's like, okay, well, where do we sprinkle it in as a flashback now?
Yeah, right. Because you're right. Chronologically, they could have put it into. You know, because into we see the initial attack or the raid, I guess, of the cops on that warehouse, which is how Mr. Man gets bloodied in the first place, because we see him fight back. Oh, I didn't think about that. Yeah, maybe it was, and maybe
that was,
it was
my best guess. That was my most charitable guess, I will say.
Well, no, I actually
how it ended up in.
I like that. That maybe not saying that these are pages that were done right, but maybe they were in the script. And they were like, you know what? These handful of pages, they don't quite work here. Can we reuse them? Can we use them elsewhere? And they found some. I actually like that. That is more. I mean,
and they may have been like storyboarded or even penciled or something like that.
Rough layouts, and then they look at the flow of the whole volume, right? And they're like, you know what?
Well, and they've been very stringent. A self-imposed page limit on these.
Yes.
You know, it's like they set the rules for like a haiku or something. Yeah. And they're like, we can do whatever we want with these 3 characters in this time. Yeah. But it's going to be 80 pages. Yeah.
Yeah. We're holding firm to that.
Because you know, Image doesn't have that standard for them.
Yeah.
Even if they came in and pitched it as an 80-page thing, I think a creator-owned book, they'd be like, well, actually, this one's going to be 82. That one's going to be 78. Yeah. Image is going to say, we don't care.
Yeah, well, because at that point the creators are paying for it. You pay for it up front. So however many pages you use, and yeah, it's perfect bound. It's a hardback square bound. So like, you're not worried about staples. You know,
right?
As long as it's as long as it's an even number of pages that can be bound. Again, I think we mentioned this either last week or 2 weeks ago. I appreciate the fact that they're all the same because it looks awesome on a bookshelf. These books look so good on a bookshelf, which I know isn't like really the kind of the point, but
that's not the point for comic people.
Yeah, it's exactly, it's why people love compendiums and omnibuy and like things look good on the shelf, you know? And when you have something that has any sort of series that has any sort of connecting motif on the spine, man, it looks good. And the fact that all these are the exact same, you know, like there is something frustrating about having every book in a series and like the spine thickness just varies wildly because, this arc was 7 issues for whatever reason, but the one after that was 4, you know? And it looks uneven on the shelf, but like these books look great. So yeah, maybe this was a couple pages from another script that they're like, you know what, doesn't fit with the flow. Is there somewhere else we can use this? And they found a spot for it here. I actually kind of like that idea because it in my mind, because I like that idea because it would imply that they're looking at the story holistically. Right?
Yes.
They're looking at the whole thing. They have it all laid out, but they're focusing on each volume, the flow of each volume. So they understand that these are individual stories throughout the whole story they're telling. And if this little bit doesn't fit with whatever flow they're trying to get in this volume, well, we still want it in the story, so can we put it somewhere else? And they're thinking about it in that way, like maybe like having like index cards with each of the chapters on them and seeing how they fit together and knowing that they're all part of the same puzzle, but the order in which they put them in. I like thinking of them thinking of the story that way.
Yeah, it'd be great. And And again, like that was really my only note for it was like, was this supposed to happen earlier? And this is where it fit? Or, I mean, like it couldn't even have been forced. Like maybe they just thought, we'll use that as a transition from one girl's story to another.
Yeah.
Rather than a hard cut.
Well, I said, and maybe it had the same purpose in a different volume, but you know what? It doesn't fit in that one, but maybe it always served that purpose. But again, the idea that they even the fact that they're thinking about the flow of the story and understand that they want to try to break it up and give you a little bit about what's happening outside the rest of the world and fill it in, even though what's relayed in that little short chapter there, it's not the most critical stuff to the story. Like none of that I think is essential. We don't need to know. We know that Ward and the rest of the dirty cops, we know that they went and blew up the warehouse where Man was. And then we saw him get away, but then the next time we saw him, he had a bullet in his head in the back of the trunk with Emma Rose. So like you put two and two together and you're like, they caught him, shot him in the head and we don't need all the steps there. So I could see how it may not have been even involved initially, but I do like the idea that the reason it doesn't seem like it's important is because it was supposed to come earlier before we saw him in the trunk.
Right.
Like we saw him die before we saw him dead. So then it would make more sense. But because we saw him dead before we saw him die, it then feels like it's redundant. Or, feels like it could be redundant. Yeah. I guess it is redundant at this point, yeah. But if the order had been switched... It's definitely
redundant, but the question is whether it's a bug or a feature.
Yeah. Because if the order is switched and we see him die, then the reveal isn't that he's dead. The reveal is that that Emma Rose is in the same car with him.
Which is not that interesting of a coincidence in a story like this where they're all going to converge.
Excellent point. Yeah, it isn't like, oh my God, it's the same car. But that's true. That wouldn't be that's less of a shock. It's more of a shock to see this character dead. But yeah, then it dulls the impact of watching maybe it's kind of a cat. Now that we're talking about, it's kind of a catch-22 here. It can go either way. So
yeah, I would not want to be the editor of this series in charge of the final decision. Like that'd be rough.
Yeah. I feel like this is one where regardless when it gets to the editorial stage, this is one I think you got to trust Fraction and Charretier on, right? In terms of the way that they ordered this, the way that they're doling out information, you have to just be like, we're going to go with, this is your puzzle box. This is your mystery. And I think you gave them the trust to give them multiple standalone graphic novels, right? You gave them the trust to not put it out in single issue. So to then have anyone come be like, I think you should really switch around these plot points and things like that feels wildly silly. So I think you have to just trust and be like, this is going to live or die. This is going to work or not work based on what they decide, how they decide to do that information.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
All right. So the next one, I would say Teenage Lesbo Motel Maids on Speed.
Yeah.
Similar note to what you said before. You don't necessarily need it, but I think this is my favorite entry. But I think it's probably also the longest one.
That's a good point.
Just going off feeling.
It's that vibe. Or Kowalski's whole cop backstory. They got to be pretty close in terms of. Yeah. Although maybe Kowalski's feels longer because we also got the current day phone call with her and her spouse, right?
Yes.
So we got more Kowalski. So it may not be specifically that backstory, but yeah, we get a lot of it here. I also love in this one though, like they subdivide panels even more. They don't quite go to the 16 panel. I guess it would be like they subdivide the longer rectangles into smaller squares, so you would have like 8 panels along one bottom. I guess it'd be 24 panel that did all of it. I like how they play with the paneling in this one, how they get smaller and smaller. There's a lot of close-ups. There's a claustrophobia to it. There's a sense of unease when you read it. But I do wonder if it is the longest. I guess we could just go back and count, but that wouldn't be listeners just like flip the pages.
It's great audio entertainment.
Yeah. But again, I think it falls in a lot of the same line of what we saw with Kowalski, in that, like, is this super necessary to the story? I don't know about that. But now we have a full understanding of who D is, just like we have a full understanding of Kowalski. And I think we understand their motivations and how they got to where they are at the beginning of the story. Again, whether all that's like super 100% necessary to understanding the plot. But again, if the book's more about character than plot, then it is important.
True. Yeah. Well said. So I don't have any great insights or revelations on it. I just thought it was the most complete vignette, and one that, especially when the paneling starts to get really trippy. Yeah. When you have, it would be functionally a 16 panel page. This page 45, they're numbered. It would be functionally a 16 panel page, but you have some double height verticals mixed in with those, and then the way the wording is, we had a blast.
Yeah, the black square, one word lettered in white. Yeah, one word per box. The way it's arranged, that carries over into the next page as well.
One might even describe that shade of white as cocaine white.
Yeah, could be. And I do love, again, with the coloring here, when we're in this backstory, everybody's like a sickly gray skin, and it's very Schindler's List, right? The highlights, the thing that stands out are the reds. It's the eye, it's the container, it's the pills, it's the tourniquet, it's all of that. That's what jumps out. But there is an unease. There's a sickliness quality to that. And then, when it jumps back into the current day, or more recentest day, we get back into her motif, but her skin color is still kind of sickly bluish gray kind of thing, Right. And these transitions and use of color to differentiate very clearly who we're with, when we're with, what we're supposed to feel. It's one reason why I love this book from a purely visual standpoint, because there's so much intention that went into how they color. Because again, none of this is like natural coloring. They're not going for any sort of remotely like photorealistic look. Everything is meant to be a feel and a vibe and a sense of the world and the character. And so much of that is done through the way the characters are colored versus the backgrounds. And I think watching this transition, not just the way it's colored, but also the way the characters are drawn, right? As they get further and further in the addiction, and just how gaunt the faces are drawn, how heavy she draws the eyes and all that. Everything it looks terrible. It looks so sickly and so horrible. And all that comes through again. That's without having to read any of the words. That's all just on the line work and the coloring. It's all just on the page.
Yeah. No, it's a gorgeous, I want to call it chapter.
It's chapter. Yeah. And but this is one of the few chapters that I think would have totally worked as an issue. Like if this were an issue overall, like it's like, here's the D backstory issue, the full one, because this has an arc to it. Like this little bit has a full arc by getting her full story from addiction.
If it stops short of her in the warehouse.
Yes.
Then I would say that like in a regular comic series, this would have either been like the type of thing where it's an interstitial between two plot lines, or maybe even like the annual, where it's like, hey, this character you've been following, here's the deep dive on them. Doesn't impact anything going forward. It just impacts what you know about this character, and you get to feel like a little bit more of an insider.
What I would say is, if this were obviously, if the whole book is rearranged and it's the length of 4 graphic novels, so let's say that makes it like, I don't know, 24 issues, something like that. In between each arc would have been a backstory, full backstory issue of each character.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and that'd be the break. And so it's the kind of thing where you see like where here's the first part of the story. Here's the full issue backstory on D. Here's the next arc of the story. Here's the full backstory on Kowalski. Next arc, full backstory on Emma Rose, and then the final arc wraps the story up. That's how it probably would be done, or that's a way I can envision it being done in a very traditional monthly release sense. But you know, without having that, them interspersing it throughout these kind of chapters, you know. It fills out the story, it fills out the world, it fills out the characters. Because ultimately it just ends with, again, we come back to the same place that we left them at the end of volume 2, which is Dee tied up to the chair and Emma Rose tied up, thrown on the floor, and then trying to figure out how they get out. And yeah, you know, we see flashes of Emma Rose, and again, this is where the coloring works out really great, right? Again, we have this like muted kind of dull gray color when they're tied up, and then every time it jumps back to her as a kid, it's a bright blue background, and her skin is like it's like a greenish.
Yeah,
it's like a Martian Manhunter. It's just wildly unnatural, right? But because the background is this light blue, it just pops against this dull gray, and it's as much backstory as we get on her. But it's her as a kid, like learning knots, and she's trying to untie herself. You know?
Yeah, and just those panels, that blue with the green, like reminds me. Like, that's the type of thing that Matt Wilson got away with over Cliff Chiang's art in Paper Girls, where they'd be walking around and there'd be like an unnatural pink sky. And it's like, wait, is the sky that color? It's like, don't worry about it. It's the vibe. Yeah, like, exactly. That's not what it looks like. Yeah. This is what it feels like. And I think that's, you know, that's what's done so effectively here, because I'm going to, like, I read this book carefully, didn't even clock that it's green skin.
Yes,
because it doesn't matter. Because I assume I'm seeing it all through some kind of filter, and you know, as you're supposed to. I think.
Yeah, because what's important is, this is a harsh change in color, so it's a different time,
right?
And you clock that. It's a younger girl,
and I remember that. Right? Yes, it's like that was the bookends of volume 2.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. 100% with the kite. So yeah, it's only when you stop and look at it, you're like, oh wait, that looks like Ms. Martian, you know, like it's
if
like
that were a single panel comic strip for sale somewhere, you'd be like, what, this isn't art. What is this?
Well, yeah, exactly.
Why is she have green skin on this little girl?
And this is one where I will go and be like, hey, if you read on guided view where it takes you panel by panel, it'd be very jarring, because this works when you see the entire page and you see those panels, just like with the phone conversation between Kowalski and her wife, right? This effect works when you see the whole page, and before you can register what's on it, your eyes register the difference in color, the difference in tone, what jumps out, what doesn't jump out. And that's the first thing you see before you see any words, facial expression, anything like that. It's the color that jumps out on the page. You see the paneling and the color. And when you are reading, only seeing it panel to panel to panel, like, that's not how the medium is meant to be seen and viewed. It's not how it's meant to be taken in, and you lose that effect when you get to that. That's why I'm so against guided view and things like that. So you need to see the whole page there to really get the effect and see how and when those panels break up what's happening in the current timeline, or whatever we're calling it, because the effect is so much more when you can see the juxtaposition of those panels.
Yeah, I would say the only time that I've ever enjoyed something like a guided view was like, if you've ever seen anyone on YouTube do what they call a motion comic, where it will kind of mimic the way your eye sees the page, though. It will go to the whole page and then it will zoom in and move left to right, top to bottom, and they'll be voicing over narration or dialogue and having sound effects. It's basically like how badly I think it's like, it must be made by manga / anime fans who read Western comics, and they're like, why hasn't all of this been adapted to a cartoon yet? And it's like, well, we don't do that here, you know.
And I think that can work if you see the whole page first, because
I thought that was an option in guided view. Maybe you see it last, which is worse.
I don't know what it is. Well, I don't know how that actually works. Maybe it is. You see it and then you zoom in. I don't know. Again, I'm not a fan of it. I don't like it because you want to see that effect when you turn the page and you see everything on it first, and that's the first thing your mind takes in, and then you start going into each panel, looking at each image or reading the dialogue or whatever's written in that page, and you work your way down. But you already have that initial shock of the first thing your eyes see. And I think because of what they do with the paneling, because the paneling in this book is so rigid, but it's diversified, right? As you mentioned, I've talked about in the last couple of weeks here, it's the page is always divided into thirds. There's a top line, a middle line, and a bottom line. And how they divide those up changes, but your eye always sees 3 levels, and they're playing with that the whole time. So it's very structured, very rigid in that way, but because they can change up the how they divvy up each of those 3 levels, you want to get that feeling from the first thing you look at. You're going to see how the page is laid out, and then the colors that Matt Hollingsworth is going with, whatever palette they've chosen between him and the rest of the team, how they break it down. You know, it all is an attempt to give the reader the feel of what you're supposed to get from the page before you actually read and digest what's on the page. And I think this book does that amazingly well. Something about Charretier's art, kind of the cleanliness of it and the color palette they chose to work with. It works so well, and it's why it's a book I like going back to, because it's one that I can sometimes I go back and reread it, and sometimes I just go back and flip through it and just look at the art and just focus on the layout and the coloring and the pen and the line work and things like that. It's a book that I think works on both of those levels in terms of revisiting.
Yeah. I don't have, again, much else to say about that. And then when you get to the final story here, we're back with Kowalski, and this is an untitled tag. Like they do that at the beginning and end of each of these, where they're not officially chapters. It's a little coda. And you finally get, I mean, the last panel is what we've been waiting to see.
That great full page splash, right? All 3 women. It's great.
And but, like, the looks on each of their faces.
Yeah.
Like Kowalski cannot believe what she's just walked into. D is like, just another day at work. Let's get out of here. And Emma is like, who could be coming in the door now? Like, they're living the same moment and having 3 completely different experiences. And we can only appreciate that because of all the back matter we got. Seeing everything about them. So, but again, in terms of actual like time on the page, Emma Rose is like way in last. So going into volume. So again, I mean, maybe we can kind of close out this way, looking ahead into the last volume here. Volume 3 was, again, heavy. We got effectively all of Kowalski's backstory, all of Dee's backstory. And we only have the little bit of Emma Rose's backstory, and all we've gotten from her is her as a kid. We know nothing of her in the city. So are you anticipating some level of backstory for her, even though
from a story standpoint, we finally have all three women together. Are you anticipating some level of, hey, we got to explore her now because she's the last one? We don't know anything about her. We don't know why she was going, well, I guess we know why she was going to the apartment building. She was delivering groceries to a friend, but we don't know anything to build up to that, you know?
Right.
We don't know any of the specifics. We don't know how she falls into this. Was it just because she called about the gun? So are you anticipating at least a chapter devoted to her backstory?
Right. Yeah. So I have to admit, my very first thought, I'm embarrassed of, but I'm going to share it because it's amusing anyway. My very first thought was this the original last page of the book? Which would have been fascinating if it had only been 3, even though I know as soon as I thought that, I'm like, no, by the time they finished 3, by the time they finished 2, they knew they were doing 4.
Yeah.
But I was like, what an ending that would be. People would be clamoring for another book.
That would be a wild choice if the entire thing was about the city is on fire, following these 3 women, and the book ends with them all in the same room, and that's it. That would be a wild choice. I actually think I would find that infuriating. I don't think I would find that clever. I can see how someone would find it clever. Yeah. I can see on what level it would be clever. I think I would find that infuriating. Yeah, I don't think I would have liked that. And obviously, you're right. It wasn't like they had 3 books and the 4th book is a tack on at the end. Obviously, the 4th book was expansion of the entire story, not just an add-on. But that was, I would actively like that. Wouldn't just be like, I don't like the ending. I would actively hate that ending, I think.
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah. Not a fan. The more I think about it, the less I like it. The more I think about it, the less I like it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think if that happened, you would just assume the 3 of them talk, catch up. They're not taking down any big systemic thing in the city, but they're all getting out okay. And Kowalski feels like, I did a cop's work today. Dee is like, I got out from underneath these people and I've still got all this cash. And Emma's like, what the hell just happened to my life?
So, let me clarify here. I don't always hate that kind of ending. That ending could work for this story if we saw each of the 3 women go on a full story.
Yes.
And then meet up. And so if we, the readers, saw how their stories intertwined, but they'd only meet up at the end, but they each had a full story. This book isn't designed that way. This book isn't designed that
right.
They haven't gone through a full story, each of them.
I will say the other comp here, and this might be a broader, but I was thinking of the movie Pulp Fiction a lot, of like how you just get these little stories here and there, and cut up timelines, little stories here and there, but you slowly start to see how they're all weaving together, and the beginnings at the end, and the character dies halfway through,
and then comes back because it's
right. But I remember watching some interview with some executive for the studio that greenlit Pulp Fiction, and he said the first time he read the script and it already had John Travolta attached to it, he hurled it across the room. He's like, what are you doing killing the biggest movie star halfway through the movie? And then he kept reading 10 pages later and John Travolta's character is there again because he didn't know he wasn't reading a linear story until then.
Well, I mean, so I can see the comp there. I think, there is, Tarantino obviously loves to play with time in that way. And I think there's a bit of that, although, again, but I think a lot of that comes down to how clever the creatives, the storytellers, either are or think they are, right? Because it always comes down to when and how you dole out information about what's happening and what you want your audience to know before you reveal something else. I want them to know, events go A, B, C, D, right? But maybe I want them to know C before B, right? But E has to follow D, but F can come anywhere. It's that sort of rearranging and puzzling. And I think there are times when storytellers can get too clever in mixing timelines up, just because they can, and then things become disorienting. I don't think this book is that hard to follow in terms of timeline wise, but I see the comp there. I see the idea of maybe every time you start a story, a chapter in this book throughout all 4 volumes, it takes maybe the first page or two to figure out, wait, when are we? Right. Is this in the past, the present, what's happening right now? And I think that is meant to be a feature. I think the bug is if you read the whole thing and you're like, wait, what was that? Right. The bug is if you can't follow. I think the feature is that immediacy of every chapter. Maybe you're not quite sure exactly when this is happening. Is this before or after the thing you just read? I think that's that bit of unease that it gives the reader. I think that's intentional. And when it's done well, I think it can be a very, very effective storytelling technique.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah. So I realized I jumped straight to the end of that one, but that was all I had to say about that.
That last chapter, it's a shootout. You see Kowalski go out there, and she's
hitting
apparently
the shoulder.
In the shoulder, and then but she's like all headshots after that. So maybe she's like the best sharpshooter there is. But yeah,
she's John McClane.
Yeah, that all just builds. That whole point of that is, again, her standing in the doorway, and what is one of the women in the room says, are you a good cop? You one of the good ones, or something like that. And then there's like a pause, and then the page turns. Like, yeah, I'm one of the good ones. But yeah, it's all build up to this moment we've waited 3 books for. The 3 protagonists, the 3 main characters, as 3 women in a room together, not at this point, not knowing how any of their lives, how any of their stories of the day have intertwined and how they've affected each other. We, the reader, know how they've tangentially been hovering and circling each other, but they don't yet. And yeah, it's I have a feeling. I know you said the idea of what if that was actually supposed to be the last page of the entire series? I really do have no doubt that regardless of how many books this series went, that was always going to be the last page of the penultimate chapter.
Yeah.
The whatever volume was right before the final volume, whether it was 3, 4, 5 volumes, who knows, that was always going to be the end of the book right before the end. And then the 3rd book is when we have all of our characters together. Even though we still will probably see more timeline, not shenanigans, but I'm sure we'll see other jumps to other points in time. But in the main storyline, the main timeline, our 3 characters are now together. And this is now a story about all 3 of them instead of 3 stories about each woman. Yeah.
Great. Any other thoughts for this one? I mean, I'm very eager to dive into volume 4.
No,
in fact, I was not reading ahead of this, but we had a little bit of a gap recording wise between 2 and 3. Yeah, and when I finished 3, I was like, wow, it's on the same tablet. I've got this cat on my lap. I guess I just have to sit here and keep reading. So,
well, and I think that's what you want with this type of book, right? You want to get to, because there is still a level of mystery here, right? Even though it's not really a mystery book per se, but what they've presented again is this kind of mystery box. So you want to get to the end, you know. And when you only have one left, when you only have 1 volume left,
and it's already in your hand. Yeah, I mean, that's like the momentum.
Yeah, exactly.
Will carry you to just finishing it in one sitting.
It would be a problem if you got to the end of this volume and we're like, yeah, I'll finish that whenever, like that would actually be an active
that's
problem.
Bad.
Yeah, that's bad. You don't want that. When there's just 1 volume left and you get to the end of this one, it should be hard to stop, especially if you have it. When you had to wait for it. I mean, I remember waiting for it. It sucked, but it was like, I know this is coming out. There was no doubt that I was going to get that last book. But now that it's all out there and available, if you have all the volumes, there's no reason to stop. You don't have to. And like you said, you had a cat on your lap. What are you going to do? Get up?
Yeah, it's against the laws of nature.
Yeah. So no, I'm very excited to get in and see how it wraps up. And again, just kind of dive into how they weave everything together. Because again, we, the reader, have more knowledge about these stories than the women do in the story themselves, because we've seen how they connected. So seeing how these threads converge, seeing how everything ultimately plays out, I'm looking forward to getting into it.
And sometimes I will note that does bother me in some stories when the reader ends up with more knowledge than the characters. Like the much maligned finale of Lost, I actually thought it was fine. Like I didn't love it, but I thought it was fine.
Yeah.
But the thing that killed me was that so many characters got that explanation of what the island is and the smoke monster and I don't know, Abraham or whatever his name was, like all of these different characters. But Jack was never a part of any of those conversations. And he was ostensibly your lead character, like one of three leads. And it just killed me that your lead character never got to know the mystery of the island.
And this goes back to what I was saying a little earlier, I think, about how clever storytellers are or aren't, or how clever they think they are, because the risk you run when you give your reader more information than your characters is that ultimately when you tell your characters, you're reiterating things that the reader already knows.
Right.
So how do you do that in a way that it doesn't feel like you're repeating yourself? Because at some point, if you have to reveal things to the characters that the reader already has, how do you get that to still feel engaging and important?
Right. Yeah. I needed in Lost, truthfully, was one other character walking up to Jack, a character who we know learned everything from the people at the center of the island.
Yeah.
And saying, hey man, we need to talk. And they both sit down.
Yeah.
And we cut away. I'm like,
and
cool.
Then we know what they're talking about.
I don't need to see how it lands on him or anything. I just need to know that he didn't do 7 years of effort and all this stuff to just remain in the dark.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are the kind of the small things, I think, when it comes to how good storytellers are at relaying the vision they have in their head, that if you can make that stuff work, because there are plenty of examples where it's clunky as hell, where you're just repeating information over and over again because the characters in the story have to get it in some way, but we, the audience, have gotten it multiple times, and bad storytellers just repeat things over and over again because the story necessitates that they do. But if you really are clever, if you really are good at your craft, you can have your audience be ahead of your characters and still have your characters learn about things, and your audience doesn't feel like you've got an info dump twice.
Right.
I think something like, the first thing I thought of, you mentioned Paper Girls before. A lot of that happened in Paper Girls, right? Where we, the audience, know a little more about what's happening with the characters, but still, when they got an info dump, like a big exposition dump of what was going on, things that we already kind of knew and had been shown, it didn't feel like you're just, I'm just reading a block of text here that just has to explain what's going on. It still felt engaging. It still felt important. It still felt like there was forward momentum in the story, even though technically you're just retreading things that you already know. Good storytelling in any medium can trick the audience in that way. And so, I think it's something to be mindful of and be wary of anytime you have any sort of mystery box storytelling construction.
Yeah.
And again, November is presenting that, even though it's not like
it's not a supernatural mystery box, which is what most
the point
mystery boxes
isn't to be a mystery box, but they are presenting that because they are withholding certain things that you don't know what's going on, so they want to have some sort of reveal and dole information out. But it isn't like the full J.J. Abrams mystery box where like the whole point is being like, what's this? Like the whole point is to figure out what's going on there. They're just Fraction and Charretier have just given a story construction where they want to dole things out at a certain pace in a certain manner. You got to see how it lands, right? Endings are hard. We always talk about that. Endings are hard, but here we have a little more runway, right? Because it isn't just like one issue you got to finish on. They have 80 pages. They have an entire graphic novel story, graphic length story. To come to a conclusion. So we'll see how it comes. We'll see how it ends up next week.
Yes, we will. All right. Well, until then, thank you for listening. Find us on all the places, StoryDarks.com, Instagram StoryDarks, Blue Sky StoryDarks, and we will see you back here next week.
Peace.